My name is Monica Griffin, and the day my sister Sarah called me a pathetic nobody in open court was the same day a man in a gray suit walked through those maroon doors carrying an envelope that would shatter her entire world. The judge's face went pale. Sarah's million-dollar lawyer suddenly looked like he wanted to disappear. And my sister, my own flesh and blood who had spent 20 years treating me like I was invisible, actually stumbled backward when she heard what was inside. What my grandfather did 20 years before he died changed everything. But none of us knew it. Not even me. This is the story of how the sister who had everything lost it all in 60 seconds, and how the grandfather I thought had forgotten me had been protecting me all along. Stay with me, because what happened in that courtroom wasn't just justice, it was poetry. And if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, if you've ever been the one they underestimated, this story is for you. Don't scroll away, because by the end, you'll understand why standing your ground matters more than you think. Hit that like button if you believe karma is real. I promise you're going to need it for what's coming. I'm Monica Griffin, 26 years old, and I've lived in Las Vegas my whole life. Not the glamorous Vegas you see in movies, the real one, where normal people work hard, raise families, and sometimes carry secrets that could break you if you let them. My story starts 30 years ago, when my grandfather, William Griffin, built an empire from absolutely nothing. Grandpa William started with one small construction company in 1985. He'd wake up at 4 in the morning, work 18-hour days, skip meals, sacrifice everything. By the time I was born, Griffin Construction had become Griffin Enterprises, a multi-million-dollar commercial real estate and development empire spanning 3 states. My sister Sarah is 8 years older than me. From the moment I have memories, she was the golden child. Perfect grades. Perfect hair. Perfect everything. Sarah graduated top of her class, went to Stanford on a full academic scholarship, came back with an MBA and her fiancé, Tyler Bennett, a corporate lawyer whose family had money that went back generations. I was different. I was the quiet one. The one with my nose always in a book. The one who preferred helping Grandpa William in his workshop on Saturdays instead of attending Sarah's charity galas and networking events. Monica's just not ambitious, I'd hear my mother Linda say to relatives at family gatherings, like I wasn't standing right there. She's content with simple things, my father Mike would add, and somehow that felt like an insult. But Grandpa William never made me feel small. Every Saturday, while Sarah was building her empire of connections, I'd sit in Grandpa's woodshop and hand him tools while he built furniture for fun. He'd tell me stories about starting his business, about the people who doubted him, about staying true to yourself when the world wants you to be someone else. Monica, he'd say, sawdust in his white hair, the people who make the most noise aren't always the ones doing the most important work. Remember that. I held on to those words like a lifeline. When I turned 19, Grandpa William started showing signs of dementia. It was small things at first. Forgetting where he put his keys. Calling me by my mother's name. Losing track of conversations halfway through. Sarah immediately took charge. I'll handle Grandpa's affairs, she announced at a family dinner, not asking, just declaring. Tyler and I have the legal and business background. Monica's still in community college. It makes sense. Nobody argued with her. Within 6 months, Sarah had power of attorney. She moved Grandpa William into an expensive memory care facility in Henderson, one of those places that costs $15,000 a month and smells like industrial cleaning products trying to mask something sadder underneath. I wanted to bring him home, let me take care of him in the house he'd built with his own hands. That's not practical, Monica, Sarah said, in that voice she used when explaining things to people she thought were stupid. He needs professional care. You wouldn't know the first thing about managing his medications or his condition. So Grandpa William went to Sunrise Memory Care, and I visited him 3 times a week. Sarah visited once a month, always with her assistant Kimberly taking photos for social media. Spending quality time with Grandpa. Family first, blessed she'd caption, while spending 15 minutes there before rushing to her next meeting. For 3 years, I sat with Grandpa William while his mind slowly drifted away. Some days he knew me. Some days he called me and his late wife, my grandmother who'd passed when I was 6. Some days he didn't speak at all, just stared out the window at a desert landscape he'd once planned to develop into affordable housing. The papers, he'd sometimes whisper, lucid for brief moments. Monica, the papers. With Dante. Remember Dante? I didn't understand. Dementia made him say strange things. Dante Muera was Grandpa's longtime friend and attorney, but I'd barely ever met the man. I assumed Grandpa was just confused, mixing up memories from his past business dealings. I'd hold his hand and tell him it was okay, that everything was taken care of. Grandpa William died on a Tuesday morning in March, 3 weeks after my 23rd birthday. I got the call from the facility while I was working my shift at a bookstore in Summerlin. He'd passed peacefully in his sleep. I cried in the bathroom for 20 minutes before my manager, Bonnie, sent me home. The funeral was enormous. Sarah arranged everything, a massive service at a cathedral downtown, hundreds of people from the business community, a program with Grandpa's photo on it that made him look like a stranger in a suit instead of the man who taught me how to use a lathe. Sarah delivered a eulogy that made people cry. She talked about his legacy, his vision, his dedication to family. She didn't mention the Saturdays in the workshop. She didn't mention how he used to make terrible jokes while teaching me carpentry. She didn't mention that his favorite thing in the world was banana cream pie from this tiny diner on Charleston Boulevard. She talked about William Griffin the mogul. I wanted to remember William Griffin the grandpa. After the funeral, during the reception at a hotel Sarah had rented out, she pulled me aside into a quiet hallway. We need to talk about practical matters, she said, straightening her black Chanel dress. The estate, the business, all of it. My stomach nodded. Okay. Grandpa's will is straightforward. As the eldest and the one with the business experience, I'll be inheriting Griffin Enterprises. You'll receive a small trust, enough to finish school, maybe buy a modest house eventually. It's what makes sense given our respective capabilities. The word hung in the air like poison. Capabilities. Did Grandpa say that? I asked quietly. That you should get everything? Sarah's smile was patient, condescending. Grandpa wasn't in a position to make those decisions at the end, Monica. Tyler and I have been managing the company's direction for years anyway. This is just making it official. What about the will? The actual will? The reading is next week. Dante Muera is handling it, you remember him, Grandpa's old attorney. It's just a formality. These things are decided by logic and practicality, not sentiment. I nodded because I didn't know what else to do. I'd never expected to inherit a business empire. I wasn't Sarah, I didn't have her education, her connections, her ruthless efficiency. But something about the way she said it made me feel like I was 8 years old again, listening to my parents explain why Sarah got the bigger bedroom, the better opportunities, the benefit of every doubt. The will reading happened on a Thursday afternoon at Dante Muera's law office in downtown Las Vegas. The office was old school, dark wood paneling, leather chairs, law books lining the walls. It smelled like paper and history. Dante Muera himself was in his 70s, with silver hair and sharp eyes that seemed to catalog everything. He'd been Grandpa William's attorney for over 40 years. Present at the reading, my parents Linda and Mike, my sister Sarah and her husband Tyler, Sarah's best friend and business partner Kimberly Shaw, and me. I sat in the corner, wearing a simple black dress from Target, while Sarah commanded the room in her power suit and expensive perfume. Dante settled behind his desk and opened a folder. Thank you all for coming, he began, his voice formal. William Griffin was very specific about his final wishes. I'll read the relevant portions of his last will and testament, executed 8 years ago when he was of completely sound mind and body. 8 years ago. Before the dementia. That was important. Dante continued, to my daughter Linda Griffin and her husband Michael Griffin, I leave my home in Las Vegas and a trust of $500,000, with gratitude for their years of family support. My mother smiled, squeezing my father's hand. To my granddaughter Sarah Griffin Bennett, I leave the full ownership and control of Griffin Enterprises, including all commercial properties, development projects, and business assets, with the expectation that she will lead the company into its next chapter with the same vision and integrity upon which it was founded. Sarah's smile was triumphant. She didn't even try to hide it. I felt something inside me collapse quietly. Tyler put his hand on Sarah's knee, already calculating, already planning. And to my granddaughter Monica Griffin, Dante read, and I looked up, expecting to hear about a small trust fund, maybe enough for tuition. I leave my personal savings account, containing approximately $80,000, and all items of sentimental value including my workshop tools, personal photographs, and my 1967 Chevrolet Impala. $80,000. The workshop tools. Grandpa's old car that barely ran. It was more than I'd expected, honestly. But next to a multi-million-dollar empire, it was nothing. Sarah literally laughed. Well, that's sorted then. But Dante held up one finger. However, he continued, and the room went quiet. There is one additional provision. A sealed envelope was left in my care, to be opened only in the event that any beneficiary contests the will or attempts to claim assets not explicitly granted to them. Why would anyone contest? Sarah said dismissively. Everything is perfectly clear. Indeed, Dante said, his expression unreadable. Let's hope it stays that way. I took my $80,000 and finished my degree at UNLV. English literature, because I loved books and had no idea what else to do. Sarah took Griffin Enterprises and transformed it into something Grandpa William wouldn't have recognized. Within 6 months, she'd rebranded to Bennett Griffin International. She sold off the affordable housing developments Grandpa had been passionate about and focused exclusively on luxury commercial properties and high-end residential complexes. Grandpa was sentimental, she told a reporter for a local business magazine. But sentiment doesn't scale. We're taking this company into the future. She closed the community outreach programs. Laid off longtime employees. Brought in Tyler's Ivy League friends to replace people who'd worked with Grandpa for decades. The company grew. Profits soared. Sarah's face appeared in business journals, at charity galas, on panels about women in leadership. And I worked at a small non-profit helping literacy programs in underserved communities, making $38,000 a year and living in a studio apartment in a decent but unremarkable part of town. Our family dinners became quarterly obligations. Still working with the little kids, Monica? Sarah would ask, in that tone that made charity work sound like a hobby instead of a job. Still reading those books? Kimberly would add, laughing like it was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. My parents would sigh and change the subject, embarrassed by their underachieving daughter. I stopped going to most family events. But I kept Grandpa's workshop tools in a storage unit I could barely afford, and I drove his 1967 Impala even though it needed constant repairs, and I held on to those Saturday afternoons in my memory like treasures no one could take away. If you're still with me, thank you. I know this is hard. I know what it feels like to be the one your family doesn't believe in. But I promise you, this story is about to shift in ways you won't see coming. Smash that like button if you believe being underestimated can actually be your greatest advantage. Because what happens next proves it. The lawsuit came out of nowhere. I was at work, helping a 7-year-old named Jimmy sound out words in a beginner reader, when my phone buzzed with an email from a law firm I didn't recognize. Notice of legal action, Bennett vs. Griffin. Estate dispute. My hands shook as I opened the attachment. Sarah was suing me. The claim was that I had unduly influenced Grandpa William during his dementia to extract promises of additional inheritance. That the $80,000 was actually supposed to be part of the company's operating capital. That I had manipulated a vulnerable elderly man for personal gain. It was insane. It was cruel. It was completely false. But it was also legally terrifying. The lawsuit sought to reclaim the $80,000, which I'd already spent on my degree and living expenses, plus damages, plus legal fees. I called my parents that night, voice shaking. "Mom, did you see?" "We saw," my mother said, her voice tired. "Monica, what did you do?" "What did I? I didn't do anything. I never asked Grandpa for money, I never." Sarah says there are irregularities. Money that should have gone to the company. Tyler has records. That's not true. Why would your sister lie? My father's voice cut in on speakerphone. She has everything already. Why would she do this unless there was a real problem? Because she's cruel, I wanted to scream. Because she's always needed me to be nothing so she could be everything. But I just said, I need your help. I can't afford a lawyer to fight this. Silence. Then my mother, "Monica, we can't take sides between our daughters. This is between you and Sarah. You'll have to figure it out." They hung up. I sat on the floor of my studio apartment and cried until I couldn't breathe. I couldn't afford a lawyer. The nonprofit I worked for had no legal resources for personal matters. I was about to try to represent myself in court against Tyler Bennett, who'd graduated Harvard Law and had a firm with 20 attorneys behind him. Then I remembered Grandpa's words during one of his lucid moments. The papers. With Dante. On a desperate impulse, I called Dante Moira's office. His secretary said he was retired, barely taking clients. "Please," I begged. "I'm William Griffin's granddaughter. Monica. He mentioned you before he died. I'm being sued by my sister and I don't know what to do." 20 minutes later, Dante called me back personally. "Monica Griffin," he said, and there was something in his voice of recognition, maybe sadness. "Your grandfather spoke about you often. Come to my office tomorrow at 9. Dante's office looked exactly the same as it had 3 years ago. He looked older, more tired, but his eyes still had that sharp quality. "Tell me everything," he said. I did. The whole story, from childhood to the lawsuit. I cried through parts of it, embarrassed but unable to stop. When I finished, Dante was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Your grandfather was a wise man. Wiser than most people knew." "What do you mean?" "That sealed envelope I mentioned at the will reading. The one I was instructed to open only if someone contested the will or attempted to claim assets not granted to them." My heart started pounding. "Yes? Your sister's lawsuit constitutes such an action. She's claiming you extracted money that rightfully belonged to the company, assets not explicitly granted to you. That triggers the provision." "I don't understand." Dante opened his desk drawer and pulled out an envelope. Cream-colored, expensive paper, sealed with red wax bearing Grandpa William's seal. My grandfather's handwriting across the front, to be opened only when they show their true nature. "Monica," Dante said gently, "your grandfather knew exactly who his granddaughters were. He knew what Sarah would become. And he protected you in the only way he could." "What's in the envelope?" "The truth." The hearing was set for a Friday morning at the Regional Justice Center in downtown Las Vegas. I wore my only professional dress, black, simple, 5 years old. I felt like a child playing dress-up. Sarah arrived in full armor, designer suit, perfect hair, Tyler beside her looking confident and expensive, Kimberly in the gallery for moral support. My parents sat on Sarah's side of the courtroom. I sat alone on mine, except for Dante Moira in his gray suit, carrying a briefcase and that envelope. Judge Margaret Ramirez presided, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who looked like she'd heard every lie and seen every scheme. Tyler stood to present Sarah's case. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward matter of estate asset recovery. The defendant, Monica Griffin, manipulated her grandfather William Griffin during his cognitive decline to extract $80,000 that properly belonged to Griffin Enterprises' operating capital. We have financial records showing these withdrawals occurred during the period of Mr. Griffin's documented dementia. We're seeking full restitution plus damages for the emotional distress this has caused my client, who has worked tirelessly to honor her grandfather's legitimate legacy." He made me sound like a con artist preying on a helpless old man. I wanted to disappear. The judge looked at me. Ms. Griffin, do you have representation? Dante stood. Dante Muera, Your Honor, representing the defendant. I was William Griffin's personal attorney for 43 years. Tyler's confident smile faltered slightly. Mr. Muera, the judge said, I haven't seen you in this courthouse in years. No, Your Honor. I'm retired. But William Griffin was my friend, and this matter touches on his final wishes. With the court's permission, I'd like to present evidence that fundamentally changes the nature of this dispute. Permission granted. Dante opened his briefcase and held up the envelope. Your Honor, when William Griffin executed his will 8 years ago, he was of completely sound mind. He included a provision, witnessed and notarized, that a sealed document would be opened only if any beneficiary attempted to claim assets not explicitly granted to them or otherwise contested the will's distribution. Tyler stood. Objection, Your Honor. My client isn't contesting the will. She's seeking recovery of company assets that were improperly diverted. That's semantics, Dante said calmly. The lawsuit explicitly claims Monica Griffin has no right to funds she received from William Griffin. That constitutes a contest of his distribution decisions. Judge Ramirez leaned forward. I'll allow it. Open the envelope, Mr. Muera. Sarah shifted in her seat, suddenly uncomfortable. Dante broke the wax seal. Inside was a letter in Grandpa William's handwriting, and several legal documents. Dante read aloud. To whoever is reading this, likely my friend Dante, if you're opening this envelope, it means one of my granddaughters has shown her true nature. I hope I'm wrong. I hope Sarah proves me wrong. But if I'm right, then the following must be revealed. 20 years ago, I established 2 separate trusts. The first, valued at $12 million, was designated for my granddaughter Sarah Griffin, to be used for the inheritance of Griffin Enterprises under the terms of my will. The second trust, valued at $15 million, was established for my granddaughter Monica Griffin, to be held in secret and revealed only under specific circumstances, specifically, if Sarah ever attempted to take from Monica what little I could publicly give her without raising suspicion. Monica, if you're hearing this, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you openly. I'm sorry your sister's jealousy and your parents' blindness made you feel small. But you were never small to me. You were the one who saw me as a person, not an empire. You were the one who cared about the work itself, not just the money it generated. The $15 million trust includes controlling interest in 3 commercial properties currently generating annual returns of approximately $1.2 million, stock portfolios, and liquid assets. It also includes a stipulation: if Sarah attempts to claim that you manipulated me or extracted money improperly, she forfeits her inheritance entirely, and Griffin Enterprises passes to you. I didn't want it to come to this. I hoped Sarah would grow into someone kind. But I'm a practical man, and I protected what I could. You were always enough, Monica. You were always more than enough. Your grandfather, William Griffin. The courtroom was silent. Completely, utterly silent. Sarah's face had gone white. That's not possible. Judge Ramirez looked at Dante. You have documentation of these trusts? Complete documentation, Your Honor. Established 23 years ago, managed by a separate trustee, all legal and properly executed. Along with a specific codicil that Ms. Sarah Bennett's lawsuit triggers the forfeiture clause. Tyler stood, his face red. Your Honor, we had no knowledge. My client was acting in good faith based on available information. Your client, the judge said coldly, is attempting to claim her younger sister manipulated their grandfather. These documents prove otherwise. They prove, in fact, that William Griffin anticipated this exact scenario. She looked at Sarah. Ms. Bennett, your lawsuit is not only without merit, it has triggered the forfeiture of your inheritance per your grandfather's explicit instructions. Griffin Enterprises now belongs to your sister. No. Sarah shot to her feet. She can't, this is fraud. Sit down, Judge Ramirez said, voice like iron. Or I'll hold you in contempt. Sarah sat, shaking. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't process what I'd just heard. $15 million. Griffin Enterprises. Grandpa knew, I whispered. Dante put a hand on my shoulder. He always knew, Monica. The next 48 hours were chaos. Sarah tried to fight it, hired different lawyers, claimed undue influence, demanded investigations. But Grandpa's documentation was airtight. 23 years of trust management, records, witnesses, all of it legal and unassailable. Within a week, the transfer was official. I owned Griffin Enterprises. I owned the properties, the developments, everything Sarah had spent 3 years building on Grandpa's foundation. My parents called, suddenly concerned, suddenly supportive. We always knew you were capable, Monica, my mother said, her voice bright and fake. We're so proud. Really? I said. Because last week you told me to figure it out myself. Silence. You made your choice, I said quietly. I'll remember it. I hung up. Sarah showed up at my apartment 2 weeks after the hearing. She looked destroyed, hair messy, makeup smeared, the perfect veneer completely cracked. You have to give it back, she said, voice shaking. The company. It's mine. I built it. I made it what it is. You built it on Grandpa's foundation, I said. And you destroyed what he actually cared about in the process. I made it profitable. I made it successful. You made it cruel. I met her eyes. You fired people who'd worked with Grandpa for decades. You eliminated the affordable housing projects he loved. You turned his legacy into something he wouldn't recognize. This is about revenge, Sarah hissed. You always resented me. No, I said, and meant it. I never resented you. I wanted you to love me. I wanted you to see me. But you needed me to be nobody so you could be somebody. I worked for that company. And now I own it. Because Grandpa knew exactly who we were. He knew what you'd become. And he protected me from you. Sarah's face twisted with something between rage and anguish. You can't run a company, she said desperately. You have no experience, no connections, no ruthlessness? I finished. You're right. I won't run it the way you did. You'll destroy it. Or I'll restore it to what Grandpa actually wanted. Guess we'll find out. She left without another word. I never saw her again. I didn't fire everyone Sarah had hired. Some of Tyler's Ivy League friends were actually talented and decent people. But I brought back the affordable housing division. I rehired the longtime employees Sarah had discarded. I restored the community outreach programs. I renamed it back to Griffin Enterprises. Profits dropped initially, but stabilized. Turns out building communities instead of just extracting money from them creates different kinds of value, the kind that lasts. I hired Bonnie, my old bookstore manager, as my assistant. I consulted with Grandpa's old colleagues. I learned everything I could while making 1,000 mistakes and slowly, carefully building something I could be proud of. I moved into a nice house. Not a mansion, just a real home with a garage where I set up Grandpa's workshop tools and finally learned to finish the projects he'd started teaching me. I drive the 1967 Impala every weekend, fully restored now. And every Saturday morning, I go to Dante's office. He came out of retirement to help me navigate the business world, and we drink terrible coffee and talk about what Grandpa would have wanted. 6 months ago, Kimberly reached out to me through LinkedIn. We met for coffee in Henderson, far from anywhere we'd run into people we knew. She looked tired, older than her 34 years. I need to tell you something, she said. About Sarah. I don't want to hear. The lawsuit was my idea. I stopped.
What?
I convinced Sarah to sue you. Kimberly's hands shook around her cup. The company was failing. We'd over-leveraged on bad development deals, Tyler's investment advice was terrible, and we were bleeding money. We needed capital fast. So you came after me for $80,000? We thought it would be easy. You'd settle, we'd get some cash, nobody would look too deep into the company's actual finances. She laughed bitterly. We didn't know about the envelope. About what your grandfather had actually done. Sarah lost everything because of you. Sarah lost everything because she's who she is, Kimberly said. I gave her bad advice. But she took it because she genuinely believed you didn't deserve anything. She believed you were nobody. That was all her. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm sorry. Because watching what happened to her, she had a breakdown, Monica. Complete psychological collapse. Tyler divorced her 6 months ago. She lost her house, her reputation, everything. She's living in a studio apartment working retail. A year ago, I would have felt vindictive satisfaction. Now I just felt sad. She did this to herself, I said quietly. I know. But I helped. Kimberly stood to leave. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know the whole truth. She left cash for her coffee and walked away. I sat there for an hour, thinking about Grandpa William and the envelope he'd sealed 20 years ago. He'd known exactly what would happen. And he'd loved me enough to protect me from it. So that's my story. The sister who called me nobody is now living the life she thought I deserved. The parents who couldn't be bothered to support me now send emails I don't respond to. The company I was never supposed to inherit is thriving under values my grandfather would recognize. And me? I'm Monica Griffin. I'm 26 years old. I live in Las Vegas. And I'm finally enough. If this story meant something to you, if you've ever been the underestimated one, the overlooked one, the one they didn't believe in, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that being underestimated isn't the end of your story. It might just be the beginning. Subscribe if you believe karma is real and justice, even when it's slow, eventually finds its way home. And if you're out there feeling invisible right now, feeling like nobody sees your worth, hold on. Your grandfather William is out there somewhere, planning 20 years ahead to make sure you're protected. Sometimes the people who love us best do it quietly. Sometimes justice takes 2 decades and a sealed envelope. Sometimes the sister who has everything loses it all the moment she tries to take the last thing you have. And sometimes, the nobody becomes somebody the exact moment they stop trying to prove it to anyone but themselves. Thank you for staying with me. Thank you for believing this was worth your time. Now go be the person your grandfather knew you could be.